Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The sun was setting over Chicago, tinting the skyscrapers with shades of orange and purple. In the bustling downtown district, the Golden Fork restaurant was buzzing with activity. It was an elegant establishment, renowned for its refined dishes and impeccable service. The crisp white tablecloths and gleaming crockery reflected the light from the lamps hanging from the ceiling, giving an impression of understated luxury. Emma Wang, 24, busied herself between the tables with nervous grace. Her dark hair was tied back in a strict bun, and her perfectly pressed uniform betrayed her discipline. Originally from China, Emma had immigrated to the United States as a teenager, and this job was more than just a job. It was her chance to build a stable life and help support her family back home. That evening, the restaurant was particularly full. Businessmen in suits chatted in hushed tones, elegant couples celebrated birthdays, and a few tourists discreetly took photos. Among them was an exceptional customer, Marcus Bennett, a millionaire known for his financial empire and legendary severity. He wasn't just wealthy, he had a reputation as a demanding perfectionist, whose slightest remark could change an employee's career. His presence imposed a respectful silence at every nearby table. As Emma carried a tray laden with sparkling wine, the restaurant's phone rang. Without thinking, she picked it up. "Hello, good morning," she said in her light accent. Her voice was soft, professional, but naturally Chinese. She exchanged a few quick sentences with the person on the other end, hung up, and smiled, pleased with his politeness and responsiveness. But she didn't notice Marcus Bennett's gaze. His sharp eyes had been watching her from the moment she began. A heavy silence fell between them. Marcus, known for not tolerating any imperfections, said nothing at the time, but the unease was palpable. A few colleagues exchanged worried glances, and Emma felt a cold chill run down her neck. That simple moment, speaking her mother tongue in front of a powerful client, would set off a chain of events Emma could never have imagined. That night, she would discover how cruel the world could be to what it didn't understand. Emma returned to her tables, trying to focus on the orders and the customers' smiles. But she couldn't forget Marcus Bennett's gaze. His piercing blue eyes seemed to probe every movement, every gesture. He didn't speak, didn't move, but his presence imposed an almost physical weight. With every step Emma took with her tray, she felt her colleagues stealing glances in her direction. Some whispered, barely audible. "Did you see?" He stared at her the whole time. Emma frowned. She'd never thought a simple phone call in Chinese could cause such discomfort. Her heart was beating faster, and her hands were shaking slightly as she placed a glass in front of a customer. Marcus made an imperceptible gesture toward his manager, Jessica Carter, who was standing nearby. The signal was clear, he hadn't appreciated it. Jessica approached Emma with a forced smile, but Emma immediately guessed that the smile hid something worrying. The rest of the shift passed in a mixture of tension and heavy silence. Emma felt as if every step she took was being watched, every word she spoke analyzed. Even the clinking of glasses seemed to amplify the gravity of the situation. As dinner drew to a close, Emma felt a knot of anxiety form in her stomach. She knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that icy stare wouldn't fade easily, and that what she considered an innocent gesture had just placed her under the microscope of a man capable of ruining careers in an instant. As soon as Emma placed the empty tray on the trolley, a quiet murmur ran through the restaurant. Her colleagues exchanged worried glances, some with curiosity, others with unease. "Did you hear what she did?" whispered a waitress, Katie Reynolds, lowering her voice. "She spoke Chinese, right in front of the millionaire," added another waiter, Danny Lee, almost incredulously. Emma felt a wave of heat rise in her face. Her blood seemed to pound in her temples. She had always been proud of her origins and her language, and she had never thought it would be a problem. But here, among colleagues stressed by Marcus Bennett's presence, even a small difference could become a monumental mistake. Some customers near them seemed barely to notice the exchange, but the icy silence emanating from Marcus made the air electric. Emma forced herself to smile, breathe calmly, and resume her service. Every gesture, every word had to be impeccable from now on, as if a single misstep could cause catastrophe. As she walked past Marcus's table to take an order, she felt his gaze still on her, merciless and piercing. The weight of that silent judgment almost pinned her to the spot. The whispers of her colleagues mingled with her thoughts, every word they spoke seemed to reinforce her fear, to remind her that she was now vulnerable before the most influential man in the room. Emma wondered for the first time if speaking her own language could really cost her her job. She tried to push the thought away, to stay focused, but deep inside, a dull worry was beginning to take hold. The service was winding down, and the restaurant was slowly beginning to empty. The customers' conversations had faded, giving way to a tense silence. Emma, relieved to see the end of her shift approaching, couldn't help but feel the weight of Marcus's eyes on her. He said nothing, made no angry gestures, but the mere fact that he stared at her like that, unblinking, was more humiliating than any verbal reprimand. Emma's every movement seemed analyzed, weighed, and judged. Even her smile, which she sent out of politeness, seemed inadequate in his eyes. Jessica Carter, the manager, finally approached, her face fixed in a professional neutrality that betrayed her discomfort. She placed a light hand on Emma's shoulder and whispered, "Emma, can we talk for a moment in the office, please?" Emma nodded, her heart pounding. As she followed Jessica, each step pounded in her chest like a drum of judgment. Colleagues who crossed her path averted their eyes, some with compassion, others with icy curiosity. Behind the office door, Marcus rose slightly from his chair, his expression completely impassive. The silence was heavy, almost palpable, and Emma felt a lump in her throat. It wasn't a verbal confrontation, but a silent judgment, much crueler. She understood that this look, this absence of words, was enough to make her feel that she had just committed an unforgivable sin in the eyes of a man whose influence could destroy everything. For the first time, Emma felt tiny, insignificant, in a world where her innocence and politeness carried no weight. Little did she know, this moment would be the prelude to a much greater humiliation, orchestrated by the power and arrogance of a millionaire who tolerated no difference. She had barely finished putting away her tray when Emma felt her heart race. Jessica Carter, her manager, called her in a calm but firm voice. "Emma, can you come to my office, please?" The mere tone of his voice sent shivers down Emma's spine. She knew, deep down, that it wasn't meant as a compliment. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the step toward Jessica's desk. Every glance from her colleagues seemed to weigh on her shoulders, as if the weight of the entire restaurant were following her. Behind the door, Jessica sat down at her desk, folding her hands. Emma stood there, unable to find the words. The air was thick with tension. Then Jessica spoke, weighing each word. "Emma, we received a complaint, from customer Bennett." Emma felt her stomach clench. She tried to smile, but it didn't go unnoticed. "A complaint?" she stammered. Jessica nodded slightly. "He feels that speaking another language in front of him is unacceptable." Emma felt her breath catch. Speaking her mother tongue, and now it was turning into a professional mistake. "But, it's just Chinese, my native language," she whispered, almost inaudibly. Jessica avoided his gaze, searching for words. "I know, but that's the position you're in." "Marcus Bennett." She hesitated for a moment. "He's a very important client. And he's very clear about what he considers acceptable in his environment." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. Reality hit her hard, what she thought was an innocent gesture might cost her her job. She looked at Jessica, hope flickering in her eyes. "You can't, he can't." But Jessica, with icy neutrality, replied. "Emma. I'm sorry. But we have to follow her request." Emma's world seemed to collapse. 6 months of work, effort, discipline, wiped out by a single sentence. She was now alone facing a system that judged incomprehension as a fault. Emma stood frozen for a few seconds, as if time had stood still. Every word Jessica spoke echoed in her head with an almost unbearable force. The silence in the office seemed to stifle all hope. "Emma," Jessica continued, her voice a little softer but firm, "we have no choice. We have to terminate your employment." The word, dismissal, fell like a guillotine. Emma felt her heart tighten, her breathing quicken. 6 months of hard work, respect, and dedication, wiped away in an instant, as if none of it had ever mattered. She tried to speak, to protest, but no words came out. Her eyes filled with tears, but she held them back, knowing that showing her vulnerability could make the situation worse. Jessica took out a file and placed it in front of her. "Here are the documents to sign. You will receive your final check and your benefits. We will do our best to keep this discreet." Emma felt a lump in her throat. The world around her seemed to recede, every sound becoming distant. She remembered the smiles of customers, the encouragement of a few colleagues, all of it now seemed like a surreal past. I. She finally stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. Jessica, sympathetic but unwavering, nodded gently. "I know this is hard, Emma. You didn't do anything wrong, to yourself. But sometimes other people's choices are beyond our control." Emma took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling in her hands. She understood that this humiliation, though cruel, marked a turning point in her life. She had to accept reality and seek a new path, a place where her culture and dignity would be respected. As she left the office, she took one last look at Jessica, grateful for her attempt at support, but aware that the battle had only just begun. The outside world seemed different, colder, more hostile. But deep inside her, a small flame of determination began to burn. She would not let this failure define her life. Emma left the office, her heart heavy and her mind foggy. The restaurant's corridors seemed narrower, colder. Every step echoed in her head like a cruel reminder. She had just lost her job for speaking her own language. Her colleagues stared at her in silence. Some looked away, uncomfortable, while others seemed curious, as if they were witnessing a spectacle whose gravity they didn't fully comprehend. I don't understand," Emma whispered quietly, almost to herself. How could simply speaking Chinese be considered a fault? She had always been polite, punctual, and respectful. Her work had never been questioned, until tonight. As she gathered her things, images of Marcus Bennett's stare and the whispers of her colleagues flashed through her mind. A wave of injustice and anger mixed with sadness washed over her. Everything seemed unreal. 6 months of dedication wiped out in an instant, and no one seemed to understand the harm that had just been done to her. She paused for a moment, breathing deeply to try to compose herself. But each breath felt heavy, as if the air itself weighed against her chest. Emma realized this wasn't just a dismissal, it was a public humiliation, a cruel reminder that her identity could be judged, attacked, even punished. For the first time since she'd started working here, she felt completely vulnerable, alone in a world that seemed intolerant of difference. Incomprehension and pain mingled with silent anger. She knew she had to find the strength to continue, but at that precise moment, the future seemed uncertain and daunting. Emma walked slowly toward the exit, her hands clutching her bag tightly. Each step seemed to echo her humiliation. She felt isolated, betrayed by a system that hadn't even bothered to understand her culture or language. As she walked through the main hallway, a familiar voice stopped her. "Emma attends." It was Alex Thompson, a young waiter she'd known for a few months. Unlike other colleagues, he'd never judged her differences, and they'd often exchanged a few words between tables. He approached quickly, his eyes serious but filled with kindness. "Emma, what just happened? It's not fair," he said, his voice low so as not to attract the attention of the customers still present. Emma shook her head, tears threatening to fall. "But they say it's because of him. Marcus Bennett," she whispered, her voice trembling. Alex placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It doesn't matter what he thinks. You didn't do anything wrong. They took the easy way out by firing you, not you." A small breath of hope crossed Emma's mind. This simple gesture, this unexpected support, reminded her that she wasn't completely alone. In a world that had just rejected her, there were still allies, people capable of seeing the value behind appearances. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself down. "Thank you, Alex, really." He nodded with an encouraging smile. "Don't let this situation define you. You're much stronger than you think." For the first time since that nightmarish evening, Emma felt a spark of determination. The road ahead would be difficult, but she now knew she could count on someone to help her through this dark moment. Alex's unexpected support became a first step toward rebuilding her dignity and confidence. The next morning, Emma woke up with a strange feeling, as if an invisible weight was pressing down on her chest. She had spent the night ruminating over what had happened, unable to sleep. And then, without warning, her phone vibrated. Dozens of notifications scrolled across her screen, messages, comments, shares. Something had happened. She clicked on one of the videos that had just gone viral. On the screen, Emma picked up the phone and spoke in Chinese, followed by Marcus Bennett's icy stare. The scene was brief, but enough to capture the intensity of the situation. The video quickly spread like wildfire. Comments poured in, some shocked by Emma's treatment, others outraged by the millionaire's attitude. Thousands of people expressed their support, shared their anger, and denounced the injustice. Emma stood frozen in front of the screen, her throat tight. She hadn't expected such an impact. What she thought was a simple local incident had become a national phenomenon. Her humiliation, initially intimate and personal, had resonated around the world. On the street, looks were beginning to change. Shoppers and passers-by recognized her face, some encouraged her with kind words. Emma felt a strange mixture of emotions, shame, anger, but also a glimmer of hope. Her voice, her culture, her choices were finally beginning to be heard. For the first time, she realized that her dismissal might not just be a painful end, but also the beginning of an unexpected opportunity to transform her pain into strength and visibility, for herself and for all those who had been silenced. Within days of the video's leak, Emma's story became a media phenomenon. Social media exploded with messages of support and harsh criticism of Marcus Bennett and the restaurant. Newspaper articles, blogs, and even television stations picked up the story, highlighting the injustice and discriminatory treatment she had suffered. Emma sat in her small apartment, watching the news with a mixture of shock and relief. Each report detailed her courage, dignity, and politeness, contrasting with the millionaire's coldness and arrogance. Online comments poured in, many expressing anger and support, some even promising to boycott the restaurant. Her colleagues and friends, surprised by the outpouring of attention, approached her to congratulate her. Alex Thompson, a loyal ally, sent her a message. "See? Even when they try to bring you down, the truth always comes out." The media had reversed the roles. Marcus Bennett, once domineering and impassive, found himself publicly criticized for his intolerance and rigidity. His attempts to control the story were failing in the face of the outpouring of solidarity and support for Emma. For the first time, Emma felt a sense of justice. She hadn't asked for anything, but her dignity, her identity, and her voice had been defended by thousands of people. This wasn't just revenge against Marcus Bennett and the restaurant, it was a reminder that culture, language, and authenticity could not be ignored or punished with impunity. At that precise moment, Emma understood that she could transform this initial humiliation into strength. She knew that her future would be different from now on, that she had gained far more than she had lost. Her life was taking a new turn, before the eyes of an audience that admired her courage and integrity. A few weeks after the incident and the video's virality, Emma began receiving job offers from other, more open and inclusive restaurants and establishments. Reputable chefs, touched by her story and courage, wanted to give her a chance to shine without judgment or prejudice. Emma stood in her new job, wearing a different uniform, but with the same warm smile that had always been her trademark. She felt free, respected, and, above all, able to express her personality and culture without fear. One day, while serving customers, she heard a whisper. "It's her, the millionaire's waitress." Emma smiled inwardly. The memory no longer hurt, it reminded her of how much she had grown and how much she had resisted. Alex Thompson, always present, joined her during a break. Look at you, Emma. You've been through hell and now you're stronger than ever. Emma nodded lightly. Yes, and now I know I don't need anyone's validation to feel worthy. The experience had been painful, even humiliating, but it had transformed her life. Emma had learned that sometimes the worst challenges could become catalysts for a better future. Her language, culture, and identity, once sources of injustice, were now celebrated and respected. As she watched the sunlight stream through the restaurant's large bay window, Emma knew that one chapter of her life had closed, and a new one, filled with possibility and dignity, was finally beginning.